Hello and welcome! Today, we are going on an incredible journey through biology's ultimate construction project. We're going to start with the tiniest, most invisible molecular machines that run our cells. And then we're going to zoom out level by level to see how they build everything, from a single leaf all the way up to an entire rainforest. So, let's dive in. So, this is the big question for today. How in the world do tiny, invisible molecules build, well, entire worlds? It seems kind of impossible, doesn't it? That these microscopic workers can put together everything from one cell to a gigantic, sprawling ecosystem. But you know what? That's the magic of biology, and we're about to follow the blueprint step by step. To even begin to answer that question, we have to start here, at the absolute smallest scale imaginable. We're kicking things off with the true unsung heroes of life, enzymes. These are the little microscopic machines that are doing all the heavy lifting inside every single living cell. So what exactly is an enzyme doing? Well, think of it like a super efficient worker on a factory line. It makes chemical reactions happen millions of times faster than they ever could on their own. They basically lower the energy bill required to get a reaction started. And the best part? They can do this over and over and over again without ever getting used up. Talk about efficient. Okay, but how do these little machines know which materials to grab to do their job? For a long time, scientists have debated two main ideas. First, there was the lock and key model, which suggested a perfect rigid fit, like a key into a lock. But the more modern idea, the induced fit model, suggests the enzyme is actually flexible. It changes its shape just a little bit to get the perfect grip, kind of like giving a firm handshake. So let's break down the differences here. The single biggest distinction is flexibility. You see, in the induced fit model, that active site where all the action happens is dynamic. It actually molds itself to its target. The old lock and key model, on the other hand, imagined it was totally static and unchanging. This idea of flexibility was the game-changing insight that really explains why enzymes are so unbelievably good at what they do. Right, time to zoom out a bit. All of those little enzyme machines, they're all working inside a much larger structure, the cell. And for a cell to stay alive, it has to control its environment. That means its most important job is managing what comes in and what goes out. You could think of it like a tiny living city with a very, very strict border patrol. So how does this border patrol actually work? Well, there are really two main ways. You've got passive transport, which is the easy route. Molecules just flow downhill from a high concentration to a low one. No energy required. But then you've got active transport, and that's the hard way. It actually requires energy in the form of a molecule called ATP to pump things against the flow, from a low concentration to a high one. And here is a perfect example of active transport in action, the sodium-potassium pump. This thing is absolutely critical for, well, almost everything, from your nerves firing to your muscles contracting. So let's walk through it. The pump uses the energy from one ATP molecule to forcefully kick 3 sodium ions out of the cell, and then it yanks 2 potassium ions in. It's doing this constantly, maintaining the vital electrical balance our cells need to function. Now, this border control isn't just about ions. It's also about water. See, water has this natural tendency to move towards areas with more stuff dissolved in it. This creates 3 possible situations for a cell. In a hypotonic solution, water floods into the cell. In a hypertonic solution, water rushes out. The sweet spot, the goal, is an isotonic solution, where everything is perfectly balanced. And if you want to see why this matters so much, just take a look at this. That's what happens to a red blood cell in a hypotonic solution, in this case, pure water. Because there are so few dissolved particles outside the cell, all the water rushes in and keeps rushing in until the cell literally bursts. It's a pretty dramatic example of why keeping that perfect isotonic balance is, for our cells, a matter of life and death. Okay, let's zoom out again. We've just seen how a single cell keeps its internal world in balance. Now, let's look at how trillions of cells can work together in these big, complex, multicellular organisms. And for that, we're going to focus on plants, the incredible biological factories that power nearly all life on Earth by capturing the energy of the sun. This right here, this is the process that powers pretty much everything, photosynthesis. It is just a beautiful, elegant piece of chemical engineering. Plants take in the simplest ingredients, sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and out of that, they produce 2 things absolutely essential for us: energy, in the form of glucose, and the oxygen that we're all breathing right now. But here's the thing.
Photosynthesis isn't just one single event. It's actually a two-part process that happens inside the chloroplast. You can think of it like a solar-powered factory. The first part, the light-dependent reactions, happen in the thylakoids. Those are like the solar panels, capturing the sunlight. Then, that captured energy gets used in the surrounding fluid, the stroma, that's the factory floor, to actually build the sugar in a process called the Calvin cycle.
What you're seeing here is this beautiful division of labor. The light reactions, they're the power generators. They capture solar energy to produce fuel like ATP, and they release oxygen as a byproduct. Then, the Calvin cycle acts like the assembly line. It uses that fuel to pull carbon dioxide right out of the air and build stable sugar molecules. It's perfect teamwork. One makes the power, the other uses that power to build.
But get this, here's a fascinating little twist. Not all plants do this in the exact same way. They've actually evolved different strategies to survive in different climates. Most plants are what we call C3 plants, which you find in nice temperate zones. But C4 plants, like corn, are built for the tropics. And then you have cam plants, like cacti, which have this brilliant strategy for the desert. They only open their pores at night to grab CO2, which saves a ton of precious water.
And now it's time for our final, biggest zoom out. We've seen how plants act as the planet's power producers. And because they do that, they become the foundation for these huge, interconnected webs of life. So let's look at how all these different organisms fit together on a global scale. We're now moving into the realm of ecosystems.
So the whole planet is organized into these massive communities that we call biomes. And each one is primarily defined by just two things, temperature and moisture. That's it. Where a place falls on these two scales, from hot and wet all the way to cold and dry, that determines the entire community of plants and animals that can possibly survive there. Now, one of the most important things to remember is that these communities aren't static. They're not frozen in time. They are constantly changing through a pretty predictable process called ecological succession. An ecosystem is always evolving, always in motion. The first type is called primary succession, and this is nature building an entire ecosystem from absolute zero. Imagine a brand new volcanic island that's just cooled. First, you need pioneer species, like lichens, to show up and colonize the bare rock. And they have to slowly, over centuries, break it down just to create the very first thin layer of soil so other plants can eventually move in. And then you have secondary succession, which is much, much faster. This is what happens after a big disturbance, like a forest fire. The key difference is the soil is already there. And that gives nature a huge head start, letting grasses, and then shrubs, and then larger trees regrow in a relatively short amount of time. It's truly nature's comeback story. Within all these changing ecosystems, species have evolved two main strategies, two different game plans for survival. On one side, you've got your R-selected species. Think mice, insects, weeds. They're small, have tons of offspring, live short lives, and they don't invest much in any single one. And on the other side, you've got K-selected species, like elephants, whales, or us humans. We're large, have very few offspring, and we invest a huge amount of parental care to make sure they survive. And this graph shows you the result of those two strategies perfectly. The blue line shows a classic R strategist, like an oyster. Thousands are born, but very, very few make it to old age. The red line shows a K strategist, like a human, where most individuals survive well into their later years. These curves are a direct visual of those two totally different evolutionary bets. So there you have it. We've journeyed from the intricate dance of a single enzyme all the way up to the global strategies for life itself. And that brings us to a final question for you to think about. In a world that's changing faster than ever, which one of these strategies, the fast and furious R selection or the slow and steady K selection, which one do you think has the upper hand today? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.